very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Since you're here, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs several quizzes. You can participate in them and improve your knowledge. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. Let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center. It's an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details and register now. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Don't miss out. Register today, as there's so much more that we have to offer. All this information, along with some must-see recommendations, are in the description of the video. Please go through it. And now on to the discussion. The Supreme Court last week stepped up the heat on bureaucrats and police officers who willingly become tools in the hands of regimes to carry out illegal orders from their political masters, saying that it is mulling setting up a standing committee in each state headed by the High Court Chief Justice to scrutinize citizens' complaints against them. A bench headed by CJI N V Ramana said, "I have a lot of reservations about the way in this country's bureaucrats, particularly police officers, are behaving. At one time, I was thinking of creating a standing committee headed by the Chief Justice of the High Courts to examine atrocities of bureaucrats and police officers and complaints made against them. But I do not want to do it now. The matter will come again." These remarks from the CJI came in a case where Additional Director General of Police in Chhattisgarh, Gurjinder Pal Singh, has sought protection from arrest from state police in 3 cases, including sedition and disproportionate assets. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze how to tackle atrocities by cops and Babus. Joining me on the program today are Parsa Venkateshwar Rao Jr., Senior Journalist, Dr. Vikram Singh, former DGP, Uttar Pradesh, and Ajay Shankar, former Secretary, Government of India. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Dr. Singh, let me start the program with you. And, this discussion also comes at a time when UP suddenly seems to be on the boil. There are several allegations about what has happened in Lakhimpur Khedi, whether there have been some sort of atrocities that have been committed by the police, some firing that has taken place as well. Of course, still there isn't a very clear picture, but the police has come out and said that there have been no atrocities and nothing, the police has not done anything untoward. But there have been certain allegations in the past as well about illegal encounters that have taken place in Uttar Pradesh. And let's discuss this particular issue in that backdrop. How would you look at atrocities committed by the police, Dr. Singh? And is it really as big a problem as it is made out to be in the media and in society? Please unmute.
Good evening, Frank and gentlemen. Thank you so much for putting this question. I wish it will require several sessions to get to the answer of what you have asked. I'll make a small beginning just now. The problem is immensely more than what it appears to be. When I joined service in 1974, my seniors told me that there are 3 officers in the entire cadre of Uttar Pradesh IPS who needed to be treated like pariahs because they were not very straight. They were not dishonest, but they were not straight. Perhaps 1 was dishonest and 2 were not straight. Put the same question today and the answer will scare you out of your wits. We have heard of Kalu Ram Rana gang in Uttar Pradesh Police PAC. Kalu Ram Rana was a company commander. You have heard of Manilal Patidar, ex-SP Mahoba, and direct IPS officer 2013 batch is an absconding accused. We have the nominations for the most corrupt, the bandit queen in the services. What have we come to? The steel frame of the administrations is showing signs not of the fault lines, but of serious rusting, and that is what their fault line is. I would say encounters. Why encounters? Why there was a single case of encounter till 1947, and that was around the year 1921 when Sir J.R.H. Nodbauer, the then SP Allahabad, had an engagement with our freedom fighter Chandrasekhar Azad in the then Alfred Park. There is no case of any other encounter, even in the 1942 civil disobedience. Of course, there were murders of Lord Mayo in Andaman Nicobar Islands, the Chief Justice in Kolkata, but they were convicted and hanged under a judicial process. This cutting of corners, this taking to extrajudicial remedies has not done good to society or to the police. I will give you a small instance, and that should answer your questions. As a young officer, as an ASP, I sent my Fiat car for the replacement of tires, new tires for the old ones. And the tire vendor said, sir, there is a senior IPS officer retired, IP officers, Imperial Police, who wants to buy your second-hand tires. Could you tell me who that officer is? Sir, he is Mr. G.R.M., former Director General Police, Uttar Pradesh, IP himself from a very noble and a Zamindar family. That was the level of frugality of the time that I have seen. Perhaps after my days, nobody will tell you of this anecdote. A retired Inspector General of Police from the finest family pedigrees wanting to buy second-hand tires. And look where we have come to. Now, even a lowly officer, a non-guested officer, will have perhaps 5 cars. Legitimate earned, no questions asked. Illegitimately earned, I have my problem, I have my own reservations. You have supposed to be frugal, you're supposed to be anonymous, you are supposed to be self-effacing. All this social media and the Twitterati and behaving like James Bond on the YouTube, this culture of narcissism has not done any good to the services. And indeed, I would say that run the extra mile, serve the people, serve the nation and society. I don't want to pontify, but yes, it was my good fortune to work with intellectual and moral giants, and I know what I'm talking about. This is the problem, the integrity, the lack of professionalism, taking recourse to extrajudicial methods. This has not done good. It's not done good to any society. It will not do good to us also, Frank.
And that is why the nation salutes officers like you, Dr. Singh. Moving on from Dr. Singh now to Mr. Shankar. Mr. Shankar, how would you look at this problem? You know, during the pandemic as well, we've seen several videos that have come to light from across the country of, bureaucrats taking the law into their own hands, beating up youth on the streets, breaking phones, getting into fisticuffs, and so much that we've noticed of late as well. How would you look at this problem? And do you think it is a big issue as far as bureaucracy is concerned?
I would like to take this opportunity to state that what we are seeing is a very, very serious structural crisis in India. You see, the state is supposed to have the monopoly of the use of force and power. And even before modern times, the concept of justice was one where it applied equally and fairly to all. And if we go back to the British period in India, where the whole policing structure of India as it stands today was created, the first major achievement of British policing in India was the elimination of thuggery in the 1830s. Now, thuggery was a terrible thing where these criminal gangs would kill traders, take away all that they possessed, and the bodies would disappear. And it would happen in remote locations. Now, the legendary Sleeman, who was in the police and then spent his 20 years struggling with this problem, and no encounter was undertaken. The first trial to get conviction for the accused in thuggery failed because in the English concept, enough evidence was not there to persuade the judge that they were proven guilty beyond doubt. But Sleeman persisted and finally got convictions and got enough convictions so that thuggery disappeared from India. Now, if we look at the Indian state today, where have we reached? We have reached, let's say, take the Lakhimpur example, which is the most recent. So there has been some truce between the state government and the agitating farmers, and one element of that truce is an FIR would be registered naming a particular person. If you look at some other state, vigilante justice is applauded. People get together and kill somebody who's accused of a heinous crime. Emotions are high. And similarly, when some notorious person dies in an encounter, there is acceptance or support from society that any man has been done away with. So the Indian state has reached a point where the faith in the normal process of a modern state, of a separation between the investigating agency, the prosecuting agency, and the convicting agency is there. They all work efficiently with intellectual integrity, and justice is done. Now that has been collapsing over the decades. So today what we are seeing are symptoms or manifestations of what I would call a cancerous development in the state structure in India. And since we are a democracy, I think we need a compact between the political parties of India that there is a serious crisis. We need to address it. And we need to address it systematically, not by a Chief Justice giving a speech somewhere about how police officers should behave, or somebody else saying how IAS officers should behave. And of course, the police is the favorite whipping boy in political discourse. So the police is terrible and so on and so forth. That will give emotional satisfaction, but will not take us towards any constructive discussion or solution of that. So I'll rest right now. My appeal is we need a serious compact across political parties that we need to restore the Indian state to where it was when we inherited it in terms of criminal justice, and what it should be in any civilized society, and what we've been in the ancient past also.
Absolutely. I'm just going to come to what must be done going forward really to try and tackle this problem. And you've touched very good points, Mr. Shankar, that I'd like to build upon and take forward. But first, let me bring in Parsa Venkateshwar Rao into the picture. And, Parsa, as far as this entire issue is concerned, like both the senior officers have already mentioned on the program so far, this wasn't the case a few decades ago. What has changed now? Why is it that we see so many incidents, and why is it that we read about so many incidents? Is it because the way we report about this also has changed, or is it just that times have changed?
Frank, I think the seeds of this problem go back a slightly long way back. It goes back to the Naxal problem in the late 60s, when there was a pitched battle between the Naxals and the police system. And the police, especially in West Bengal, really went haywire under Chief Minister Siddharth Shankar Ray. And the people were rounded up indiscriminately. A lot of young people were killed, whether they were guilty or not. And it was a gray area. And they could have argued saying that philosophy was destroy the state and kill the class enemies. And so the only way they could counter it was, and that continued, I think. It might have become a little less in the 1980s and 1990s, but the political class became a little lawless. They began to use the police system to settle scores of their own. And then it is a very, very messy, complex situation where you cannot really pinpoint saying the police have failed, the administration has failed, or the justice system has failed. So it's a very, very complicated in the sense that you cannot pinpoint one source for the illness or for the abuse and misuse of the system. So I don't know where we start the whole thing. And I think we have to start with the police, clean up the police administration to the extent that is possible. And it is very essential that the police and the administrative service, I know it is easier said than done, to keep them immune from political influences. How much we can do it is a real problem, but they must be answerable to the law and not to the political masters. And that perhaps would clean up the system halfway through, not completely. And secondly, the people, on all sides, the public as such has to be very, very aware. As one of the gentlemen has pointed out, an evil man is killed, a gangster is killed, and it doesn't matter how he was killed, whether he should have been taken into custody and put through the trial. People heave a sigh of relief because he was a menace to society. So that is a big problem, So we have to educate. People must know that the rule of law should not be tampered with in any situation, under any provocation. That whatever the problems you face, you have to bring the people to the court, to the bar of justice, and then convict them. That feeling should be very, very strong on all sides, not just on one side. And one of the easier ways of doing it in the police system is to keep the prosecution independent than that of the police thing. The prosecution should be able to say, okay, this cause holds good, this is not just, or this is just, and this can be pursued. If we can create that little island, perhaps we can go a lot, because we cannot change completely the whole system. But I think we should start, think of doing a little bit here and a little bit there and see what can be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me take the discussion forward now and build on the points that both the gentlemen have made and take them forward with you, Dr. Singh. You know, so one is, of course, the interference of the political class. That is one aspect. And do you believe that the police is an easy target every time that something goes wrong? You know, blame the police and hang someone from the police department, and that way you put away all the problems at large, because even the society at large doesn't look at the police very favorably as a whole. So the police becomes an easy target for the political class as well and for civil society.
Absolutely, Frank. Police is the favorite whipping boy, not only of the politicians, but the public, the media, and the contribution of the Bollywood industry is no less. Of course, there have been films like Dabangam and Singham and others, which have been very greatly patronized by the police force. But the whipping boy syndrome of the police is very much a thing which is absolute reality. Then coming down to the political interference. On one hand, look at the anachronism, look at the contradiction. On one hand, you would like the police to be the favorite whipping boy. On the other hand, Prakash Singh versus Union of India 2006, the case where the police was supposed to be insulated by the Supreme Court directives of the 6-point directives in respect, not a single state government or any government, any political party showed any willingness even to look towards the reforms, what to talk of acting upon them. The 18 states which did pass a Model Police Act was more by way to circumvent the solemn orders passed by the Supreme Court rather than in the spirit to implement those orders. Now, why? In my own conversations where I had at a personal level with senior political leaders of various political parties, in fact, most of the political parties, and the confession, I would say that they indeed expressed that the day we have the police reforms, Vikram Singh ji, I'll have to look for another job for myself. My entire politics is based on the servile police force, a compliant police force, a police force that is absolutely like a private militia of the political people. What has happened in Lakhimpur Kheri? I would not like to believe what is rumored, and I do hope that these rumors are false. But wherever you scrape the surface, Frank, you get to the bottom of the thing is that some political entity is there to orchestrate, and he seems to be having the remote control and seems to be controlling things from his remote control. I do hope that it is not true or elsewhere. But again, the unpleasant truth that comes or emerges after any ugly incident, including Lakhimpur Kheri, after the faithful investigation would show that the string of investigation and the light go to some political entity. I do hope that we take remedial measures and ensure that these fault lines are addressed. I would only say that our Honorable Chief Justice was very, very magnanimous, and with a lot of foresight, he said that these are the fault lines that he would like to address. Have a committee of judges. I would say whatever orders have been passed by the Honorable Supreme, at least in the first go, let us have a faithful implementation of those orders in the Prakash Singh case. Let us have the police reforms in place. Let us insulate the police. And more importantly, one last point, the youngsters today are smitten by films like Dabang and Singham. You have the Hyderabad model where the accused were taken under the guise of being reconstructing scene of crime, and they were gunned to death there. Then the Vikas Dubey model of Kanpur, Uttar Pradesh. This is not what law is supposed to be. Law is supposed to be absolutely supreme, not whimsical, not knee-jerk, or a matter of choice that I can act like Dabangam or Singham. And then, in fact, you go to the YouTube. It's such a shame that police officers are more keen to pose like Dabang and Singham heroes rather than real-life police officers, servants of the people, be anonymous, and to be of service to society and to the poor people of this country. Right.
Let me build on that point and, try and pique your smile as well, Mr. Shankar, and talk about this social media syndrome, as far as bureaucrats are concerned. It's no less in Indian bureaucracy as well. You see them posting pictures with hashtags like yellow Twitter and red Twitter and white Twitter, and it has nothing to do with their service or what they are supposed to be doing. How would you look at this? That is one. Secondly, the bigger issue, when we're talking about atrocities, you have this whole bunch of cases that have come up, including the judiciary, where judges have gotten sites allotted to themselves. Same has happened in the Indian bureaucracy as well. How do we deal with these kind of issues?
In another program of yours, I had expressed the view, which I will repeat, that if I were in government or advising government, I'd say forbid the use of social media by serving civil servants, except when it is required in the discharge of their official functions. So if there is an official statement to be made, you make it on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube, it reaches very fast, and that is effective. And we've demonstrated in Odisha that messages on a coming cyclone has brought down deaths from 30,000-40,000 in a cyclone to 20-30. But other than the discharge of a public purpose, serving officers should be debarred from going on or whatever they're doing. But that's a minor issue. The bigger issue, I come back to what I said earlier, we need consensus in society that we need drastic change. And we need to drive our political leaders to talk to each other across parties and agree that change is required, a fundamental change, which is difficult to achieve. Because without that motivation and will, I'm very doubtful about anything material changing in 6 months or 6 years. And the fact of the matter is that even today, some party or the other is in power in some state or the other. And law and order is a state issue, policing is a state issue. And if there is consensus that we need fundamental change, then I think a roadmap can be drawn up on how to bring it about. But the roadmap will have to cover everybody. It will have to cover the police, it will have to cover the political elite, it will have to cover, of course, the IAS officers who play some role in districts in some parts of India. And it also has to cover judiciary. Now, I'll give you a problem which nobody talks about. Now, there is this famous case of Tarun Tejpal in Goa. I read the judgment, about 500. The judgment could have been written in 40-50 pages. The Supreme Court entertains petitions on FIRs and anticipatory bails and gives long judgments. And that's not the job of the Supreme Court. The trial court, where judges and prosecutors make great name for themselves in all modern societies as being a good prosecution lawyer or a good FBI or a district attorney investigating officer and a good judge. They are not there on the scene because they are not seen as performing their function efficiently and with intellectual and professional integrity. So you have to identify the problem in each vertical, agree on what can be done in the short run, which will set a good example, and then build on it. And maintain the momentum for some years, because if as was said that when we began service, hardly any IAS or IPS officers was considered dishonest, and now it's identifying the honest ones. Now, this also can easily be set right, because the powers of investigation and of assessing assets disproportionate to means can be used and used very effectively. And similarly, for the kind of misuses we are talking about, a serving police officer enjoys full immunity as an employee of the state or as an instrument of the state for actions done in good faith and in a bona fide manner. Now, if in a few selective cases this, immunity is withdrawn and individuals are personally held accountable for extreme acts of misdemeanor and pay a personal price, things will change and change very dramatically. I mean, like for in the civil side, I know that once the CAG and the CVC mechanism became very effective and the free media became very effective, then people started becoming very careful about what they wrote on files and the decisions that were taken on files. It's not that wrong decisions are not happening, but the files became cleaner. Now, clearly, in the police system, the political executive gives no orders. All his orders are verbal or the inducement of lucrative postings or shift to a posting which is considered a humiliation. So surely the police officer who takes decisions of a particular kind should be subject to scrutiny of the integrity and the bona fide nature of those decisions. So you can look at building blocks, get some consensus, and then move forward. But I again reiterate, the starting point has to be that the political party in power in the state must have the confidence that its political appeal is strong enough. It does not need to use the police to either maintain its political legitimacy or gain political legitimacy.
Absolutely.
That has to be the starting point.
Absolutely. So, Parsa, let me bring you in once again, let's talk about this particular issue as well of political parties, because you have covered politics for a few decades now and know how it works and how the system functions as well. Considering the kind of highly polarized environment we are in right now, politically speaking, do you see any consensus being worked out, especially when it comes to issues like this? Because at the end of the day, each political party wants to use the bureaucracy and the police as a tool.
Very much, very much. The political class feels that once it is in power, it has got the legal mandate to use the bureaucracy and the police in the most atrocious manner, in violation of the law and all that. I think one of the ways, this is a general problem. The police do not inspire confidence among the common people, because police have certain arbitrary powers which they misuse. The power to arrest. They can arrest anybody and put them in a lockup for 24 hours and no questions asked. Only after 24 hours they are produced before a magistrate. The physical torture meted out to anybody in the lockup is beyond any scrutiny. So even a law-abiding person is afraid to step into a police station because the feeling is the police can misuse their power. So somewhere, if we put in place the laws saying the police cannot arrest a person arbitrarily, the police cannot keep a person in custody, not even for 12 hours or 24 hours, immediately he has to be produced before the court. Something of that sort has to be made to constrict the powers, the discretionary powers of the police. If we keep that framework, perhaps even the political class will not be able to misuse as much as they really do nowadays. Because this arbitrary power of arrest and keeping a person in the lockup, the police custody is a scandal in a democratic country.
Absolutely. All right, time to get quick closing comments from all my panelists with the best way forward. Of course, we know that right on top of that agenda has to be political reforms first, only then can anything else reform. So leaving aside political reforms, because we know that that is something that might not happen in the immediate near future, what can we do going forward, Dr. Singh?
There is so much that we can do. And I would expect the top leadership of the police and the administration to be the role models, to be the lighthouses and run the extra mile and give matured leadership to the junior colleagues. In fact, it is good to be frugal. It is good to be professionally competent. It is good to be socially sensitive. And indeed, I think 80% of the problems can be addressed by a great leadership that has been shown and has been displayed also by people who have been intellectually and financially honest and straightforward. Yes, indeed, and give them the impression that those who are corrupt, doubly dying shall go down to the wild dust from whence he sprung, unwept, unsung, and unhonored. This must be known to one and all that corruption has no place in India today.
Absolutely. Mr. Shankar.
I would endorse what has been just said. The fact of the matter is that the people of India give the highest respect to officials who are known to be honest and have professional integrity. And that respect is worth far more than any amount of material goods that people can otherwise acquire. And I would also add that political parties and leaders would gain tremendously in the medium to long run if the people felt that they were seriously trying to improve what is really, in my view, the most serious structural problem of the state and the country today. So there is political gain to be had from addressing this issue. There is, yes, there's no silver bullets, there'll be no dramatic change overnight. But if the people feel a serious effort is being made, whichever party does it, whichever CM does it, would gain enormously politically and gain far more than he would gain by some of the populist freebies, etc., that they are required to do, and they also add to public welfare. I'm not sort of undermining all the other things that parties do. But I think if this were brought center stage, they would certainly gain a lot. That case needs to be made to the public at large as well as to them. It is in your interest to do it.
Very true. Very true. And Parsa, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I feel that the police must be trained from the constable level to that of Director General of Police, that a criminal is to be tried through due process of law. Once the police learn how to treat the criminal, a wrongdoer, according to law, then they will learn to behave with the rest of the society. I think this has to be dinned into their mind, saying you have the power to do certain things, but you have to do within the limits of the law. And the limits of the law means criminals have to be treated as suspects and they have to be taken to the court, and they can only be convicted by the court and not by the police.
A non-corrupt police force can fix so many wrongs in our society and truly show us the way and ensure that we have a better place to live in. I hope that happens sooner rather than later. And I hope that the Indian bureaucracy and Indian police service gets more people like Ajay Shankar and Vikram Singh, because that is the need of the hour. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the big picture, sharing your views and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you.
So what's coming out of this discussion is that atrocities committed by civil servants is a big issue, and there is more to it than meets the eye. There is a structural crisis and the problem is serious. It needs to be addressed immediately. There has to be political consensus on the issue. Civil society also needs to come together to put pressure on the political class to bring about change. What we need is an independent bureaucracy and police force. Also, accountability needs to be fixed and examples made of those who err. The senior officers should set good examples for their junior colleagues and lead the way from the front by setting great examples. Well, before I go, once again, let me remind you to like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and share the video as well so that more people get to know about Bharata First. Do subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. The Bharata First team runs several quizzes. You can participate in them and improve your knowledge. If you like our content, please contribute to keep it alive. A small contribution that you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. Let me also take this opportunity to inform you about Bharata First Knowledge Center. It's an initiative that will help each one of you in your competitive exams and transform the way you learn. Go to kc.bharatafirst.com for more details. Experience a whole new way of gaining knowledge through the Knowledge Center. Hundreds are already reaping the benefits of the Knowledge Center. Don't be left behind. Register right now and ensure that you don't miss out, because there's so much more that we have to offer. All this information along with some must-see recommendations are in the description of the video. Please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.